Hello folks, how you doing? Scotty. So I recently just purchased the G7X Mark II. I never owned the previous version of the G7X, so I know nothing in terms of a comparison. I've seen review videos. A lot of people have been doing recordings and they say it's really popular for, of course, to do with the vlogging side of it. But of course, the main reason why I got this digital camera, the G7X Mark II, is simply for the photography side of it. And of course, I do have picture examples. I've seen a lot of people, you know, talking about the Canon G7X Mark II in terms of the light that it lets into the camera. That is largely down to the very fact that it does have a 1.8 aperture. Because I don't think anybody's touched upon this, but from analysing it, the maximum narrowest aperture that you can reach is f11. I wouldn't expect this to be anything like my 5D Mark III full frame body camera. I've got a 70D. I'm not entirely sure I would kind of put this above something like that. But from my perspective, you know, it's for something that you can just slot in your pocket and you can take out and it's quick to put on. I mean, literally, that's how quick it is. It goes on immediately, and if you've got your camera settings right there, it's quick, you can take a picture on the go. For me personally, from what I've seen of the bokeh, and if you don't understand what the bokeh is, it's basically the sort of blurred background. It's more distracting. Therefore, you won't really get the kind of bokeh you would get from, of course, your more expensive photography lenses, and of course to do with the other cameras like the DSLR. I mean, for example, if I was to put on even my 100mm macro lens, it's got such a beautiful bokeh, and you can see one of the pictures here, and you can see that the massive difference where it just completely blurs out the background. Hello, how you doing folks? I just thought I would do an actual test of this whole thing to do with the video, just to give you a prime example of what the quality is like. I am actually in a kind of very dull, kind of dark type of room, and it's just the way this is. I'm actually kind of getting used to the whole thing. In terms of the photography, which I mainly got this for, you can obviously set it to manual and adjust your aperture. Now these are things that I'm going to cover more, perhaps in depth, about the camera, to help you better understand, to get a better, more functionality out of your G7X Mark II. Because of course there are people who I came across in vlogs and stuff, and they didn't quite understand to do with the grain noise, they didn't quite understand certain things to do with the light. They really only understand from the automatic settings and things, and it can be quite handy if you know, put this on the manual mode. I'm not, because I haven't really tested it in terms of video, etc. In terms of manual, but this can at least help you to better understand the camera, so you can probably take better pictures, and you know, it might be beneficial for yourself. Hello folks, how you doing? Scotty. So this is just a wee test. You've probably heard the video from other people that have recorded. Let me know how this sounds. It's a shame that this camera does not have the external mic input, which of course is a downside. But anyway, I just thought I'd give you a quick update. Right now I'm going into town, I'm going to take pictures. I've already got a number of them, and I'm going to do a test. when you're doing street photography, you're in a situation where you have to try and capture candid photographs where perhaps they don't notice you taking a picture of them, and from perhaps lower angles. And when you've got a DSLR, even on silent mode, you still hear the shutter going off. You've got all these issues, and plus it's quite bulky. People will know you've got it there, and it can be quite intimidating. Something that's just so simple as the Canon G7X Mark II is simple enough. You've got it, you can quickly switch it on and off. As I say, just quickly switch it on. And the beauty of it, even if you're doing hip photography, where you've got it down at your hip, you can actually flip the screen and you can look down, just kid on your fittering about with settings, and you can, take a shot of someone. That's the beauty of having something like that, the flip screen. I know a lot of people like to switch it up and they can, have it on selfie mode, and that's the wonderful thing about it in terms of video. Even for regards to if you're taking a picture where you're kind of shooting up the way and kind of down in terms of photography, it's got the screen there, you can tilt down and you can see, and it's really, it's ideal for something like that. What can I say? Someone mentioned something about the 1080 video. I can speak from first hand. I've got a 5K monitor, okay? I've got a 5K monitor because it's the iMac 5K when it was first released with a Retina display, and I can say that some of the videos that I've been watching with this compact camera, with just this video of the G7X Mark II, I think they must have been recording it in 60 frames per second or something with 1080p. And what can I say? The quality is outstanding for something at 1080. That's me saying that firsthand. For 60 frames per second using this, even on a 5K monitor, it's outstanding quality. So don't let that put you off. Plus the fact 1080, it's quick to record on, easy enough to put on and edit, and it's less hassle than of course recording, because right now I'm actually recording with AX100. It's an FDR AX100, which is a Sony camcorder. It's a really expensive camcorder. I love the quality, 4K and everything, but it does take a bit in terms of editing. It's really massive file sizes and all the rest of it. That's that's the downside about 4K. Okay, you can downsize it and scale it down, which is an advantage, but don't be disappointed with the video quality in that, because it is quite something, even for that. Although, for those of you who would buy this in the UK, be sure to actually check your settings in the menu, and instead of putting it on PAL video settings, set it to NTSC, which is American, simply because I've noticed that PAL only allows a maximum of 50 frames per second, with of course if you set it to NTSC, it allows you to record on 60 frames per second. It's a bit strange that. I don't know if it's got something to do with the, the different... I'm not clued up in that. I'm not even going to go there. Okay, so there are certain things I still do need to get up to speed with regards to this digital camera. Certain wee things such as the ring function, etc. Just wee small things. But I'm going to touch upon what is essential. What you would probably want the best out of, such as the manual setting. And you might put it on manual and find it intimidating. You might not really understand what the things are, and that's what I want to briefly touch upon, because that can give you better functionality of your camera. When you put it to the manual setting, you'll notice these numbers down the bottom, and some people can get a bit confused and they fitter about with these things, and they might even put that bottom left one right down just to get more light into the camera, and then they kind of wonder why they've got all this sort of camera shake and everything. Okay, so I'm going to explain just briefly on these three things and the relationship between these three things, which is to do with your shutter speed, which also acts as your exposure, of course, as well as your aperture and your ISO. Your bottom left box, the faster you make your shutter speed, in other words, if you put your shutter speed up to, say for example, 1000, this means you'll get a very still image. Like if you were to shoot a bird and you shot a bird at 1000 shutter speed, 1/1000th of a second, you're basically going to get a really still image of a bird fluttering its wings. And that's how you'd capture things of moving objects for sports, and that's what that's handy for. However, you'll notice when you increase the shutter speed, of course, as well, that acts as your exposure. There's a darker exposure. So the faster your shutter speed, the darker the exposure. Therefore, you're going to need to compensate by putting perhaps your aperture wide open to perhaps 1.8 on this camera. And of course, if you've exhausted using the aperture and it still looks dark and the shutter speed wasn't fast enough, you may then be forced to increase the ISO. So in other words, the ISO at the right hand side, which you'll see it says ISO, I think the ISO that here unfortunately only goes down to 125. On a DSLR you can get it down to 100 or even 50. Ideally you want to keep that ISO down as low as possible to about 100. You probably think to yourself, well, it's letting less light in. Well, the reason why you want to have the lowest ISO number down at about 125 is simply because you're going to get a better quality of image. There's less grain. When you increase the ISO, okay, it lets more light into the camera. However, it increases grain noise, which of course you're losing quality of your image. So that's something you may want to take into consideration. Your aperture. Now your aperture, and the widest aperture on this lens, on this camera, it just happens to be an aperture of 1.8. So the f1.8 is the widest aperture, and that means that when you take a shot, let's say you took a shot of someone, a portrait shot, you're going to blur out the background. There's a shallower depth of field because it's a wider aperture and there's more light let into the camera. With that being said, however, when you increase your aperture and stop it down to f11, there's less light into the camera. It's a narrower aperture, but you get an extended depth of field. I hope that gives you a little insight to the manual settings. How do you adjust your aperture, you may ask? Well, from the default settings, you can adjust your aperture, the f number, by turning this ring at the front, okay? And you can adjust your shutter speed using this wheel, I've noticed, which is fairly straightforward. I'm not exactly 100% on any function to change the ISO using this. I tend to just use the touch screen, and you can change the ISO to whatever you want. I usually have it down at 125 for the best quality of image. I know a lot of people will use this for the sake of video, but I just thought I would give you it from a photography point of view, for someone who is studying photography, and it's worthwhile. So anyway, folks, if you have any questions with regards to this camera, feel free to ask me in the comment section below, and I'll be sure to get back to you. Okay, thank you. Cheers.